Grandpa died in October. I remember that day because it was snowing. The first snow of the year, big, wet flakes that hit the ground and melted right away, leaving gray streaks on the asphalt, like nature itself was crying. But I didn't cry. I stood by the casket and looked at the face of the man who'd been my father. My real dad left when I was 5. I barely remember him, but Grandpa was always there. He walked me to school, taught me to fish, showed me how to hammer a nail and how not to be afraid of the dark. He used to say, "Artyom, the most important thing in life isn't money. It's being remembered. If you do something good, people will remember. If not, you just pass through." I didn't fully get it back then. Now I do. When he was gone, I realized I wasn't just losing a relative. I was losing an entire world where I'd been safe. Grandpa was my fortress, and the relatives who showed up at the funeral were an army coming to divide his ruins. There were a lot of them. Aunt Zina, his daughter, always unhappy, always greedy. Uncle Vitya, her husband, sly and quiet. Their son, Sergei, who thought he was the main heir because he was the continuation of the bloodline on his mother's side. Plus cousins, husbands, wives, kids. They all flocked in like crows to carrion. I stood by the casket alone. Mom was too weak to come. She has a bad heart, and the news of Grandpa's death put her in the hospital. I said a prayer for her. Sorry I couldn't bring her. Grandpa loved Mom. She was his favorite daughter until Aunt Zina turned everyone against her. Old story, don't want to dig into it. But at the funeral, I felt that hatred. Aunt Zina didn't even say hello to me, just nodded to the side, like, "You're extra here." After the service, when the casket was nailed shut and lowered into the ground, we gathered at Grandpa's house. It was an old house, but solid. On the edge of town, surrounded by tall pines. Grandpa built it with his own hands in the 60s. Every corner, every floorboard, every splinter, everything was soaked with his warmth. I loved that house. I grew up there every summer. And now strangers were sitting in it, drinking tea with store-bought cookies. Grandpa's cabin. And Aunt Zina was running the show. She pulled a document out of her bag, put on her glasses, and started talking. Her voice was scratchy, like an unoiled door. "Okay, so the will. Father left written instructions. Bury him next to Mom. We did that. The house, the dacha, and the car, all of that goes to me, as the only surviving daughter. And Artyom?" She looked at me with a smirk. "Artyom gets the old wall clock, the one that hasn't worked in about 10 years. Everyone laughed. Sergei loudest of all. "Wow, a clock," he said, slapping his knee. "Hang it on the wall and admire it. We'll be busy dividing the house." I sat there in silence. My mouth went dry. I didn't care about the house. What hurt was the way they talked about Grandpa, how they'd turned his memory into a flea market. I stood up and said, "Thanks, I'll take the clock. And don't forget, Grandpa used to say, whoever remembers the good, gets the good." Aunt Zina smirked. "Remembers? You visited him once a year, tops. We came every month." I didn't argue. I knew the truth. They came for the money. Grandpa's pension, his savings, his garden, they hauled it all away. I came just to be with him. Sit, talk, go fishing. Grandpa used to tell me, "Artyom, you're not like them. You're like me. You don't need money, you need a soul." I didn't realize he was preparing me for something bigger. Maybe he didn't know himself. After the funeral, I went back to the city, to my one-room rental that cost half my paycheck. I was working as a sales manager at a small company, grinding away, saving up for my own place. Grandpa's clock sat in my backpack. I didn't throw it out, didn't even open it, just stuffed it in a corner and forgot about it for a month. Then Mom got worse. She ended up in the ICU. The doctor said she needed rest and fresh air. She couldn't live in a stuffy city apartment anymore. And that's when I thought of Grandpa's house. Technically, it belonged to Aunt Zina now, but she lived in another city and probably wasn't planning to move there. I called her and asked if Mom and I could stay in the house at least until summer. She paused, then said, "You gonna pay? Utilities, electricity, gas, you cover it all. And repairs too. I'm not setting foot in that place, I don't need it. But I'm not selling it yet. And don't touch anything without my permission." "Got it." I got it. I said yes. That same evening I packed our stuff, picked up Mom from the hospital, and we drove to the town. It was the beginning of my new life. I had no idea. The house greeted us with the smell of damp and neglect. Everything was covered in dust. Spiderwebs on the windows. An old mousetrap in the corner with a dead mouse. Mom cried. She said, "Oh God, how could it get like this?" Dad loved cleanliness. He'd never have allowed this. And I thought, Aunt Zena and her crew didn't even bother to clean up after the funeral. They were too busy celebrating their victory. The first 2 weeks we cleaned like crazy. I washed windows, scrubbed floors, fixed the wiring. Mom cooked, did laundry, embroidered. Slowly, the house started breathing again. The smell of pies and clean sheets came back. I hung Grandpa's clock on the wall, the same one they'd mocked me with. It hung on an old nail, the hands frozen at 2:30. I tried to wind it, nothing. Then I took it down and decided to open it up, see if I could fix it. I've always liked tinkering with mechanisms. Grandpa taught me. He used to say that every broken thing has a secret. You just have to find where it broke. And I found it. Not a broken part. A secret. I opened the back of the clock. The mechanism was old German pre-war. Grandpa said the clock came from his father, my great-grandfather. I carefully took out the gears, oiled them, checked the spring. Everything looked fine. No reason it shouldn't run. Then I noticed something strange on the inside of the back cover. Not a scratch, not a factory stamp. Engraving. Very fine, almost invisible. I held a magnifying glass to it and read, "Wall by the stove, 3rd row, 7th brick." My heart started pounding. That was Grandpa's handwriting. I'd recognize it anywhere. He always formed his letters with pressure, with little tails. What I was holding was a message. To me. Why me? Because I tried to fix the clock? Because nobody else would have bothered poking around inside? Aunt Zena would have thrown it in the trash. Sergey would have sold it for a few bucks. But I opened it. I realized that Grandpa didn't leave me that clock by accident. He knew that only I would look inside. I didn't say anything to Mom. Didn't want to worry her until I checked it out. That evening, after she went to sleep, I grabbed a flashlight and went to the stove. The stove was old, built by Grandpa, white with blue tiles. It took up half the wall in the living room. I started counting bricks. 3rd row, 7th brick. It looked exactly like all the others. I knocked on it, a hollow sound, not like the ones next to it. I tried to pry it with a knife. It didn't budge. So I got a hammer and a chisel. I chipped away carefully, trying not to wake Mom. The brick gave way. I pulled it out, and behind it was a void. A small niche, maybe 8 inches deep. Inside was a bundle, wrapped in an oily rag. I pulled it out with trembling hands and unwrapped it. Documents. Old, yellowed, with official stamps. I didn't get it at first. Then I did. And I couldn't breathe. They were land deeds. Not for the lot the house stood on. For land in a neighboring district, where there was now an upscale cottage community. 3 hectares. 3 hectares of land that Grandpa had inherited from his father back in Soviet times. He never said a word about it. Nobody in the family knew. But I found it. I hid the niche back, put the brick in place, cleaned up all traces. In the kitchen, I spread the documents on the table and started reading. Turned out Grandpa wasn't just some retiree. When he was young, he'd worked as an engineer at a big factory, and they'd awarded him the land for his service. But he never built on it because it was too far from the city. Then the city grew and the land ended up inside a developing area. Now there were townhouses there, each worth millions. And 3 hectares. That was tens of millions. Grandpa knew. He'd kept the documents hidden, waiting for the right moment. And he left me a clue. In the clock. That nobody wanted. That they'd given me as a joke. I didn't sleep all night. I thought about Grandpa. How he'd smile when I said I wanted to be honest. How he'd shake his head when Aunt Zena demanded money. He knew they'd come. Knew they'd try to take everything. So he hid the most valuable thing where nobody would look. Inside an old clock. Behind a brick in an old stove. And he left the key to the person who'd bother to look inside. I didn't know what to do next. I wasn't a lawyer, didn't understand legal documents. But I knew this was mine. By right of memory. By right of love. By right of not asking, but receiving what I'd earned. I decided not to tell anyone. Not even Mom. She couldn't handle it. I hid the documents under a floorboard in my room. and I started to act. Quiet, slow, the way Grandpa taught me. Haste is only for catching fleas, he used to say. I hired a lawyer from a neighboring town so none of the relatives would find out. The lawyer confirmed it. The documents were real, the land had indeed belonged to Grandpa, and legally it should go to the heirs. But the will didn't mention it, so it would be divided by law. My mom was Grandpa's daughter. Aunt Zena was also a daughter. I was a grandson on Mom's side. We all had rights, but I had the documents, and I could act as I saw fit. The lawyer advised me to get everything officially registered first, then tell the relatives. So that's what I did. The process took months. Trips to archives, courts, notaries. I spent almost all my savings on fees and legal costs. But I didn't give up, because I knew Grandpa was watching and smiling. And one day I got the ownership certificate. Split between me and Mom 50-50. Aunt Zena got nothing, because when we filed the paperwork, I provided evidence that she hadn't lived in the house, hadn't cared for Grandpa, and wasn't legally entitled to that land. The lawyer found a loophole. I won't get into the details. I'll just say that the injustice was fixed. The same injustice that happened at the funeral, when they mocked me and sent me off with a broken clock. That clock was working now. I fixed it, ticked on the wall, counting down the seconds to my triumph. I didn't plan on revenge. Honest, I just wanted to set things right. But when Aunt Zena found out that I'd registered the land in mine and Mom's names, she went ballistic. Sergey called me. He was yelling into the phone. "Are you out of your mind? That's our land. Grandpa wanted to leave it to us. You stole it." I answered calmly. "Grandpa hid it so nobody would find it. I found it, because I listened to him. You just counted money. Want to sue? Go ahead. I have all the documents. You have nothing but greed." Sergey hung up. A week later, I got a court summons. Aunt Zena filed a lawsuit claiming ownership. She hired a lawyer, a former investigator, who she thought could fix everything. I hired my own, the same guy from the neighboring town. Honest, old, experienced. He said, "Don't be scared, Artyom. You've got strong evidence. Just don't let them get to you." The trial lasted 3 months. Hearing after hearing. Aunt Zena brought her witnesses, neighbors who claimed that Grandpa supposedly wanted to leave the land to her. I brought Grandpa's diary, which I'd also found in the hidden niche. There were entries like, "Today Zena demanded money again. Said I owe her because she's my daughter." Strange logic. I don't owe her anything. But Artyom, he's a good kid. He listens. He doesn't ask. I think I'll leave him the most valuable thing. But not yet. Let it sit a while. In the clock. The judge read those passages out loud. Aunt Zena went pale. Sergey started mumbling about forgery. But a handwriting expert confirmed it. Grandpa's real handwriting. In the end, the court denied her claim. The land stayed with me and Mom. The judge said, "The plaintiff has not provided convincing evidence. The defendant, on the other hand, has presented documents confirming ownership and the intent of the deceased." Aunt Zena stormed out of the courtroom screaming, "I'll appeal. I'll go to the Supreme Court." But she never did. She didn't have the money for an appeal. And I, by the way, did. The land was worth a fortune. I didn't sell it right away. Advisors told me to wait. The area was developing. Prices were rising. I waited a year. Meanwhile, Mom got better. Fresh air, peace and quiet, Grandpa's house. All of it put her back on her feet. She even started working remotely, sewing custom orders. And I kept going into the city, but not for my old job, for new business. I quit the company that didn't appreciate me. Started my own small venture with money borrowed from friends on nothing but my word. 2 years later, I sold the land to a development company. I got an amount I couldn't have dreamed of. $7 million. Yeah, 7. I'm not throwing numbers around for effect. That's exactly what it was. And in that moment, I realized that Grandpa had given me more than just land. He'd given me freedom. Freedom from poverty, from fear of tomorrow, from having to bow to bosses and relatives. Freedom to be myself. But the most interesting part came later, when news of my luck spread through the family. They all came to the town. All of them. Aunt Zena, Sergey, Uncle Vitya, even the ones I'd only seen at the funeral. They came in 2 cars with flowers and cakes, like it was a celebration. I was sitting on the porch of Grandpa's house reading a book. Mom came out to meet them, but they didn't even look at her. They looked at me. Aunt Zena smiled so sweetly it made my jaw ache. "Artyom, sweetheart," she cooed. "We're so happy for you." And we were thinking, maybe you could help out your own flesh and blood? Sergey's business is falling apart, we're drowning in debt. You're rich now, you won't even miss it. I closed my book, looked at her, at Sergey, at Uncle Vitya, and I said, "Remember what you said at the funeral? You said that clock was all I deserved, that I was nobody, that I didn't matter. You laughed at me while I stood by Grandpa's casket. You didn't even let me say goodbye properly, because you were already dividing the skin before the bear was dead. And now you come begging for money? From the one you threw away." Aunt Zena started crying. But these weren't tears of remorse. These were tears of resentment. Resentment that I wouldn't give her what she thought was hers by right. "But we're family," Sergey shouted. "Blood." I stood up and got right in his face. "Blood? You remember when you said, 'Hang the clock on the wall and admire it'? Remember how you laughed when I walked away empty-handed? And now you come asking? I'm not giving you a thing. Not a penny. Not a ruble. Not a cent. Because you didn't even deserve that broken clock I got. You thought Grandpa's inheritance was a house and a car. But the most valuable thing was hidden. And it was found by someone who knows how to wait. Who remembers. Who doesn't haggle over a casket." They left, slamming doors, cursing, yelling that I'd be sorry. But I've never been sorry. Not once. Because Grandpa taught me one important thing. Money doesn't make you happy. But it gives you the ability to protect yourself from people who want to destroy you. I bought Mom an apartment in the city so she'd have a place to go if she wanted. I renovated Grandpa's house. New fence, fixed the roof, put in vinyl windows. The house became cozy. I still live there myself. Not in the city, in the town, in Grandpa's cabin. Because that's where I feel his presence. This table where we drank tea. This stove where I warmed myself in winter. This clock where I learned patience and wisdom. You want to know what happened to the relatives? Aunt Zena went bust for good. Her little shop went under. She moved in with Sergey, but he kicked her out after 6 months. Now she lives alone in a cheap apartment on the outskirts and sometimes sends me letters. I don't reply. Sergey tried to sue me again, but lost. He's in debt, his car got repossessed. Word is he started drinking. Uncle Vitya died a year after the trial. Heart attack. 3 people at his funeral. Me, Mom, and his neighbor. Aunt Zena didn't come. She was on a bender. I don't hold a grudge. I just state the facts. They chose their path.
I chose mine.
Sometimes I go to Grandpa's grave. Lay flowers, sit on the bench, and thank him. Not for the money. For the wisdom. For the patience. For teaching me to see what matters. The clock is still on the wall. It's running. Tick-tock. Counting the minutes of my new life. I fixed it back then, and it's never broken again. Like it was waiting for that moment. Like Grandpa was saying, "Now you're ready, Artyom. Now go live. But remember, real wealth isn't in gold. It's in not being alone. In having a home you can return to. In being remembered and loved even after you're gone. I remember, and I love, and I hope that someday I'll have grandchildren, and I can teach them the same thing. Not greed. Not envy, but the ability to wait, to search, to find, and not to give up, even when the whole world is against you. I didn't sell all the land. I kept a small plot next to the house. Now there are apple trees there. Grandpa loved apple trees. He used to say, 'An apple tree is a memory tree. Plant one, and you'll remember your whole life.' I planted 3 saplings the year I won the case. They took root. Last spring, one of them bloomed. White flowers. Mom came out on the porch, cried and said, 'Dad's watching us. He's happy.' I hugged her and didn't say anything, because she was right. Subscribe to the channel if you liked this story. I've got another one about how I found a gold chain in the ground by that same house. That happened later. Also interesting. Hit like if you think I did the right thing. And comment below, what would you have done in my place? Would you have forgiven the relatives or not? I'd really like to know. And remember, treasure isn't always in a chest. Sometimes it's hidden in an old clock and a broken heart. But if you know how to listen, if you're patient, if you remember, you'll find it. Like I did. Thanks, Grandpa. Thanks to you. See you in the next video. See ya.